This video is a sequel to my other Future of Berserk videos, where we look at the condition of the Berserk manga, where it is, where it looks to be going, and obviously talk about the author Kentaro Miura himself. Berserk, the big hiatus titan. The proposed solution to the hiatus for Berserk has been on hiatus itself for a year now, and the big news from last year was an announcement that turned out to be an art exhibition. It's a shame it wasn't something more ambitious, but hey, at least this way we'll get to see something new from Kentaro Miura, even if that something is going to be subject to dozens of delays in the face of the pandemic. Last year, I covered the fact that Kentaro Miura and his team began working on a new unrelated manga to Berserk. This series, Duranki, ran monthly for 6 chapters before going on hiatus with a couple of skips here and there. It's now been on hiatus for a whole year, whilst Berserk has seen 5 chapters release since Duranki began, which, for a year and a half, is a little bit less than usual still. I guessed in my last video that the series would be a distraction from Berserk, and I suppose that kinda holds up when looking at these numbers, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. It's also interesting to see that right as Duranki begins, we've been getting really plot-heavy chapters. I'm not trying to say that the Casca chapters before Duranki's appearance weren't really plot-heavy, but in terms of what to reveal, Casca's return was much more on the cards, and more a matter of time than something like the reveal of Void's advent. Maybe there is a case after all to talk about the healing qualities that can come with Miura taking time away from Berserk. I still think that the seeming lengthiness of Duranki might be unhealthy for the long run, but conversely to all of this, Berserk came back again and again. What we actually started seeing was Duranki take a back seat. It hasn't released now in about a year. This was just when Berserk came back too. So if the possibility is there that it in fact does take the entirety of Miura's personal team to produce either of the 2 series in a 2-month time span, then it really is to be considered a distraction. Would anybody really want Berserk to disappear so that the team can put forward some more Duranki? I'll leave that question for you guys to answer. But the problems of Berserk that I've covered for so long have always been there, and they always will be there so long as bigger changes don't take place. The artwork requirements for the series are too high. Too many cooks spoil the broth, sure, but having an entire team only being able to produce a chapter every quarter of the year is still just too low of an output for what Berserk would need to complete. Something else needs to take a hit. Either the work team inflates and the identity of Berserk's image takes the hit, or if the overall detail itself takes a hit and we see quality more reminiscent of the Black Swordsman arc. Because it's something more drastic that's gonna have to do it. We've had chapters split into 2, we've had batches being released, we've had teams of people being recruited, we've had different series to take Miura's mind through a more refreshed state, and through it all, the output remains nothing to shake a stick at. I'll keep making these Future of Berserk videos for as long as Miura and crew keep thinking of different workarounds, because it's quite fun to look at the inner solutions and problems that come with such a massive series and such a massive production. I don't take any joy from it, but there really isn't much else to do than to weigh the possibilities and imagine what the best case scenario could be. Kentaro Miura is still only 55. That's not bad. There's more than enough time to steer the ship onto a straight course. The metaphorical ship isn't going quick enough to reach its destination on time, so it either needs more crew to row the boat, or it needs to lose cargo to go quicker, the crew being employees and the cargo being details. As well as that, Berserk is a hiatus series that, even now, gives me the most hope, believe it or not. Winds of Winter is being written by a 70-year-old that started this unreleased book 10 years ago and still hasn't seen release, despite not being the final book in the series, that series being Game of Thrones. Hunter x Hunter has now seen its second 2.5-year hiatus right off the cusp with a whole new continent being explored by about 250,000 named characters. Sure, Togashi is also 55 years old, but the scope of that story is so much farther out than Berserk's, and its hiatuses so much larger and unpredictable than Berserk, that it makes one hesitate to hold out hope. With Berserk, we've been seeing Miura address these issues with solutions as half-effective as they might be, but approaching them with an open mind. And that's something that deserves respect. It's something that hasn't really worked out too well so far, but with his heart in the right place, it could be next year or the year after that where we see something really monumental affecting the release schedule, like one of the drastic measures I mentioned before. Having the mindset of simply addressing the problem, like Miura has had for years now, is the first step on the right path, and it's something that neither Togashi or George R.R. Martin like to address. The way they go about it seems to be just plugging away until it's done. That's their choice, but I don't really hold out much hope for the fact that they haven't shifted on that mindset in decades. Miura's changing stance is a good sign, and even if Miura doesn't go down one of these routes, we have that scope. We can see where he's wanting to take things, roughly that is, and it's something much more tangible than those other two series. Being in April, it's more than likely that Miura will, without any change, crank out 2 to 3 more chapters this year and have that output for the foreseeable future. In 10 years, we'd be at chapter 400, and I'd assume that would cross over from the Fantasia arc into the final arc. This is something that some people don't even consider, and it's another part of why I continue to hold out hope. As details draw together and conclude, there's become less and less wriggle room. Miura is going to continually know where he's going more and more as time elapses. The argument of him not knowing how to end things will considerably weaken as time continues, and this makes his output issue fall more and more onto simply artwork. With that in mind, Studio Gaga becomes a vital asset for that ending to happen. I've also never talked about the possibility of Miura rushing the story at some point, and I've even heard it be said that that's what we're seeing right now with about 30 chapters worth of massive info dumps and meaningful progression. It's a pretty breakneck amount of progression, to be fair, ironically released really slowly. If you read it all back to back at once, we go from what pretty much acted as a detour straight to the climax of decades of manga. I guess if pacing were to stay like this until the series ends, it really would be a rush, and whilst these chapters are really good, and I would like to see the rest of the story paced like this, it is the most dangerous way of reaching the ending. Maybe a careful balance of all these things is what needs to be found. Take on a couple more staff, accept that the art will take a hit, stuff a little more content into each sized release, and maybe that would see us hit that ending in a really comfortable way. Because right now it's still just not quite there. But there is more hope now than there was last year, and even more than the years before. Since I got into Berserk just under 10 years ago, about 35 chapters have come out. In 10 years, if another 35 chapters come out, we'll still be in this situation, and it will be a bad thing. So whilst there's hope, it's a strained thing, and I think it's worthwhile to look at this data and continually try to find answers, because it's not a sure thing. Taking a look at the first Future of Berserk, we had nothing to assure a future at all. Since then, he's assembled a team, seemingly refreshed himself, and gotten the story onto a solid trajectory. I think the key thing is to find a way to make Berserk a regular release before Miura turns 60. If, in 4 years, that point has not been reached, then I think the worry is deserved. Because whilst 10 years of content will lead us into chapter 400, and maybe even round off the Fantasia arc, it would put the job of making a final arc fall on a 64-year-old Miura, and that doesn't sound like good news. That's the Future of Berserk as of 2021. I still hold out hope. We have some time. What do you guys think below? With Miura actually making changes to release, do you think he could potentially sacrifice quality, or put the look of Berserk itself on the table? Comment your thoughts down below. Like the video if you liked. I'll do another Future of Berserk for the years that come, and especially if any of those changes end up getting made. Let me now give a massive thanks to my patrons. Thanks again, everyone who supports me. Oh, and I just wanted to say thank you for 50,000 subscribers. For my next video, I'm going to be doing a special thanks Q&A for the first time. So if you have any questions, then post them down below in the comments, and I'll get through as many as I can. There's no limit to questions, you can ask as many as you want. And yeah, once again, have a wonderful night.